Welcome to the DMF. I'm Justin Younts. This is part two.
Yeah. Was there was there something because in this book, what I think is really special about your book is that you're talking about something that a lot of acting books don't really touch on, which is the mindset, the self-esteem of the actor, which is what I thought was really refreshing about reading your book. Is it's like it's not uh, do this, it's not do that. It's here's where you are mindset wise. Here's what you need to convey here,
Mhm.
inside. So when you walk in the room, it's not just this, put on thing that you can just like take off. Was there something that you wanted to convey in that book that you felt was missing in though in those acting books? Is that kind
Oh,
of
that was pretty much the impetus or the driving force behind me writing the book was because no one's talking about this,
yeah,
and a lot of times these acting trainings are all about turning out actors, but not dealing with the mind, working on the mindset of it, and that's why like a lot of these schools, what I've noticed is a high turnover rate, high burnout rate for one of these
mm,
conservatory graduates. They'll spend, 4 years on a degree, or 3 years on an MFA degree, spend a lot of money. And then after a few years, they're out, they're out of business doing something else.
do you think that's a problem in that they're not addressing that?
I think that's part of it,
Mm,
that they're not going with the realistic, what it's going to mentally take to be an actor, what it's mentally going to take to be in an industry that is tough and has a lot of moving parts at all times.
yeah. Yeah, because when I went to conservatory, I went to the neighborhood playhouse. I went to Strasbourg, and yeah, they don't really talk. You don't really when you actually get into the business, it's completely different from what you're being taught.
Right.
Is is that just is there a way to make that adaptation more smooth, or is it just kind of two different trains of thought coming at you?
Um, I mean, it could be two different trains of thought, and I think even both. I think you can by incorporating classes like this in the school, and giving more of a realistic picture, and then this way, in case it would be better sometimes to spend 1 or 2 semesters rather than spending 4 years to realize this is something you may not want to do.
Yeah.
So I think it could also be exciting. I don't want to discourage it, but at the same time, I also think it's important to be realistic. And, just because you graduate from conservatory doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be on Broadway next year, or that you're going to
Exactly.
be, on a series as a series regular. It's still going to take years. And that's why sometimes, the reality is most working actors need at least a 10 or 20-year plan, you know, at least.
Yeah.
That is that, and I've had conversation with graduates who are frustrated. They're telling me, I've been out of school for 2 years. Why haven't I made it? And I would say to them, I was like, look, you've only been out of school for 2 years.
Yeah. That I think that is that the danger of the dream that they're trying to sell you at the conservatory is this idea of like, or is that something that came out of their head and not something necessarily that the conservatory is putting in their head? That they're like, oh, I'm going to go to conservatory and I'm going to come out and, in 1 year I'll be here. And then in another year I'll be here.
Yeah, well, because there are some rare success stories that
Of
do this
course.
happen, and that can happen, but it's very rare.
Yeah.
Where okay, you graduate and then a year later you're headlining on Broadway, or you're a series regular in a Netflix series or an NBC series.
Yeah.
That does happen, but it's very very rare,
They,
and
they
it
all,
just
they all told us about like Miles Teller when he was pulled out of Strasbourg to go do the rabbit hole or whatever with Nicole Kidman or whatever, and it's like those are the exceptions or whatever. I'm sorry,
yeah.
I didn't want to interrupt you, but I just wanted to put that in there.
No, it's absolutely correct. Though there are exceptions. They
Yeah,
are, and while I think it's great to highlight that, I also feel it may be a bit misleading. If you
Yeah.
sit there and say that this can happen, but at the same time, what if it doesn't happen? What's your next plan? And that
That-
would be how hard are you going to work? Because
Yeah.
that's kind of the only way to really succeed in this business. You've got to work hard, very hard.
One of the things that I wish, I mean, they touched on it in school, but like, I think the most important thing an actor needs to learn is relaxation under pressure.
Oh
Because
yeah,
if you can have that, then the creativity will come out. If you come in all stressed out in the room, it's going to block you. It's going to make it harder for
hey,
you to cry, is to move through emotions.
of course, if you're blocked, it's definitely gonna be a problem, and it's gonna come out in other ways.
Yeah. Yeah, you're not even going to really know it, but I think a lot of it is coming from being not relaxed in the room and not knowing how to do that. That's why in the book you talk a lot about meditation. That was, if I could ever do anything over again, I would have gotten meditation sooner, because that was a game changer for me, because it just
Hmm.
was able to teach you that, okay, that happened, but it's not the end of the world. You might, yeah,
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, one of the things with NLP, one of those truths of NLP is that there's no such thing as failure, only feedback.
exactly.
So, you know, even if you make a mistake or flub a line, it's keep
It's,
going,
yeah,
and it's feedback for you,
yeah,
and that means the next time you'll do even better now because you have
yeah.
that feedback.
I think one of the mistakes a lot of actors do is they'll be like, "Can I start over?" And it's like, if you just kept going to the end, you might have been able to do that. I remember I did something for a casting director, and it wasn't going well, but at the end, I was able to win him back.
Hmm.
Because I stuck with it. I didn't just go, "Oh, this is not working out. Let's stop it." Because you're not going to do that on set. You're not going to be
No,
able to do
and
that in a Broadway play.
of course not. You got to keep going,
Yeah,
and if you keep going, a lot of times the audience would not even know that you flubbed the line
yeah.
because unless they read the play, verbatim. Other than that, it's
Yeah.
gonna they're not gonna know it, and just keep going. And I think that's where actors start beating themselves up in the head. Is when they make these mistakes, they're very hard on themselves.
Yeah. And it's hard because it's in that subconscious. It's not
Hmm.
like something that they're necessarily aware of. They
Of
just are.
course.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
and a lot of that stuff they're taking in, baggage from the subconscious.
yeah. And New York is, especially if you're in New York or one of the big cities, you're surrounded by a bunch of different people. So, if you're
Hmm.
empathetic and you're in this vulnerable position, all these things are gonna come out of you. And that's why I think it's very important to have like meditation, because that's a place to go when you don't feel good. It's like, I can go here, and
Hmm.
this will be there. And what you'll find over time with meditation, um, is it'll show up in your life when you don't even know it. Like you'll be like, all of a sudden you'll be really mad, but you'll be like, what, that wasn't that big a deal, and you'll be able to
Yeah,
calm down. So it's
of
like
course.
this. So it's like this thing that you not necessarily like. I feel like meditation gets this bad rap where it's like we're gonna be bliss bunnies all day, and it's like, no, it's about, you've got it's about coming back to that neutral.
Hmm. Yeah, to be totally neutral on that.
Yeah. The the other thing I think that's important for actors to learn is vision, is to have a
Yeah,
vision of where you want to go. If you can be relaxed and yes.
yeah. Vision, know your type, know your brand.
Yeah.
And that's where I think a lot of actors make mistakes because usually the first thing I ask in any meeting is what are your goals? What do you want to do? And some things will be I want to work with this director, that director, these type of projects. I think those are going to be more likely to lean to success versus those. Hey, I'll take anything.
Yeah.
No, I mean it's great to want to take anything, but specialize in something, really focus on that, 2 or 3 types that you really can embody and really take advantage of those. And then, what else can happen? Other stuff may happen organically, but knowing your vision and knowing your type, I think is another predictor of success. And I wish schools taught that too, more of the business aspect.
Yeah, that's a thing that I found was missing is they don't, a lot of, also, you find a lot of acting teachers who have a bad perception of the business, and they will bring that onto I had that with an acting coach, and he was great and everything, but it was like, I would bring him asides and he'd be like, just ripping them apart. And I'm like, I got to go in here and not think about that this isn't good. And like, he's just tearing it apart. It's, so.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to say, I don't necessarily believe it, but there's usually a lot of people will say, those who can't, can't do, those who can do, those who can't teach. And, there are some some acting teachers that are fabulous working actors, in right now, but there's also a few that never been on set, and when I see them keep teaching actors, I'm like, interesting.
Yeah. You see
but so they're living through the dreams, and they're trying to, or they're bitter, when they by the time they get into the classroom.
Yeah, but I feel like they're pushing that onto the actors, and that's another subconscious thing. It took me a while to kind of figure it out. It was like, wait a minute, this is not good for me to be having this idea. I want to be in the business, and he's slowly making me, it's that you talk about it in the book, finding a group of people who you can work with. You also talked about this in some of your interviews that you've done on other podcasts, of finding that group of people that, that lift you up, or finding somebody who's even, where you want to be, like a mentor.
Yeah, and I always say hang out with more successful actors than you are right now at that moment, because it'll build you up. It'll force you to, build your skill set up and step up your game. Just like on the other hand, and this has been, I wasn't the only one who said this, hundreds of people said this. If you hang out with people that are negative, it's also going to drop you down and hold you back tremendously. And this has been backed up by a lot of research, so it's not just a guess here, that actually does happen. So having a good tribe is important, though, and the more successful people will hold you accountable, and they're not going to be threatened by successful people are not going to be threatened by your success. They're going to be championing it too. The people that are threatened by your success are those that are that are not doing well.
Scary thing is, though, I found people that, were, and they actually have, that they were threatened by success, and it was amateur. So that's what I wanted to talk about is, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.